All right, Chapter 1, How Danny, home from the wars, found himself in error, and how he swore to protect the helpless. When Danny came home from the army, he learned that he was an heir and an owner of property. The viejo, that is his grandfather, had died, leaving Danny the two small houses on Tortilla Flat. When Danny heard about it, he was a little weighed down with the responsibility of ownership. Before he ever went to look at his property, he bought a gallon of red wine and drank most of it himself. The weight of responsibility left him then, and his very worst nature came to the surface. He shouted, he broke a few chairs in a pool room on an Alvarado Street. He had two short but glorious fights. No one paid much attention to Danny. At last, his wavering bow legs took him toward the wharf where at this early At last his wavering bow legs took him toward the wharf where at this early hour in the morning the Italian fishermen were walking down in rubber boots to go out to sea. Race and sympathy overcame Danny's good sense. He menaced the fishermen. Sicilian bastards, he called them, and scum from the prison island, and dogs of dogs of dogs. He cried, Chinga tu madre, piojo. He thumbed his nose and made obscene gestures below his waist. The fishermen only grinned and shifted their oars and said, Hello, Danny, when'd you get home? Come around tonight. We got a new wine. Danny was outraged. He screamed, Bon un gondo a la cabeza. They called, Goodbye, Danny. See you tonight. And they climbed into the little boats and rowed out to the Lampara launches and started their engines and chugged away. I'm not supposed to pronounce it Lampara? I'm not sure. Because it wasn't in italics or anything. The Lampara launches. Danny was insulted. He walked back up Alvarado Street. They're going to wait from him. Not, people don't forget. I feel like they're going to jump him later. Not to be negative, but Danny was insulted. He walked back up Alvarado Street, breaking windows as he went, and in the second block, a policeman took him in hand. Danny's great respect for the law caused him to go quietly. If he had not just been discharged from the army after the victory over Germany, he would have been sentenced to 6 months. As it was, the judge gave him only 30 days. And so for 1 month, Danny sat on his cot in the Monterey City jail. Sometimes he drew obscene pictures on the walls, and sometimes he thought over his army career. Time hung heavy on Danny's hands there in his cell in the city jail. Now and then a drunk was put in for the night, but for the most part, crime in Monterey was stagnant. And Danny was lonely. The bedbugs bothered him a little at first, but as they got used to the taste of him and he grew accustomed to their bites, they got along peacefully. He started playing a satiric game. He caught a bedbug, squashed it against the wall, drew a circle around it with a pencil, and named it Mayor Clough, or Mayor Clough. Then he caught others and named them after the city council. In a little while, he had one wall decorated with squashed bedbugs, each named for a local dignitary. He drew ears and tails on them, gave them big noses and mustaches. Tito Ralph, the jailer, was scandalized, but he made no complaint because Danny had not included either the justice of the peace who had sentenced him, nor any of the police force. He had a vast respect for the law. One night when the jail was lonely, Tito Ralph came into Danny's cell bearing 2 bottles of wine. An hour later he went out for more wine and Danny went with him. It was cheerless in the jail. They stayed at Torelli's where they bought the wine until Torelli threw them out. After that, Danny went up among the pines and fell asleep while Tito Ralph staggered back and reported his escape. So he broke in. Oh, Tito Ralph was the jailer, right? Tito came in Danny's cell, bringing 2 bottles of wine. An hour later, he went out for more wine, and Danny went with him. It was cheerless in the jail. To rally where they bought the wine to throw them out. Tito Ralph staggered back and reported his escape. When the brilliant sun awakened Danny about noon, he determined to hide all day to escape pursuit. He ran and dodged behind bushes. He peered out of the undergrowth like a hunted fox, and at evening, the rules having been satisfied, he came out and went about his business. Danny's business was fairly direct. He went to the back door of a restaurant. Got any old bread I can give my dog? He asked the cook, and while that gullible man was wrapping up the food, Danny stole 2 slices of ham, 4 eggs, a lamb chop, and a fly swatter. I will pay you sometime, he said. No need to pay for scraps. I throw them away if you don't take them. Danny felt better about the theft then. If that was the way they felt, on the surface he was guiltless. He went back to Torelli's, traded the 4 eggs, the lamb chop, and the fly swatter for a water glass of grappa, and retired toward the woods to cook his supper. The night was dark and damp. The fog hung like limp gauze among the black pines that guard the landward limits of Monterey. Danny put his head down and hurried for the shelter of the woods. Ahead of him he made out another hurrying figure. As he narrowed the distance, he recognized the scuttling walk of his old friend Pilon. Danny was a generous man, but he recalled that he had sold all his food except the 2 slices of ham and the bag of stale bread. I will pass Pilon by, he decided. He walks like a man who was full of roast turkey and things like that. Then suddenly Danny noticed that Pilon clutched his coat lovingly across his bosom. Or, hey, Pilon, amigo, Danny cried. Pilon scuttled on faster. Danny broke into a trot. Pilon, my little friend, where goest thou so fast? Where goest thou so fast? Pilon resigned himself to the inevitable and waited. Danny approached warily, but his tone was enthusiastic. I look for thee, dearest of little angelic friends, for see. So what? Pilon resigned himself to the inevitable and waited. Danny approached warily, but his tone was enthusiastic. I looked for thee, dearest of little angelic friends, for see. I have here 2 great steaks from God's own pig and a sack of sweet white bread. Share my bounty, Pilon, little dumpling. Pilon shrugged his shoulders. As you say, he muttered savagely. They walked on together into the woods. Pilon was puzzled. At length he stopped and faced his friend. Danny, he asked sadly, how knewest thou I had a bottle of brandy under my coat? Brandy, Danny cried. Thou hast brandy? Perhaps it is for some sick old mother, he said naively. Perhaps thou keepest it for our Lord Jesus when he comes again. Who am I, thy friend, who judge the destination of this brandy? I'm not even sure thou hast it. Besides, I am not thirsty. I will not touch this brandy. Thou art welcome to this big roast of pork I have. But as for thy brandy, that is thine own. Pilon answered him sternly. Danny, I do not mind sharing my brandy with you half and half. It is my duty to see you do not drink it all. It is my duty to see you do not drink it all. Danny dropped the subject then. Here in the clearing I will cook this pig, and you will toast the sugar cakes in this bag here. Put thy brandy here, Pilon. It is better here where we can see it and each other. They built a fire and broiled the ham and ate the stale bread. The brandy receded quickly down the bottle. After they had eaten, they huddled near the fire and sipped delicately at the bottle like affected bees, and the fog came down upon them and grayed their coats with moisture. The wind sighed sadly in the pines about them, and after a time a loneliness fell upon Danny and Pilon. Danny thought of his lost friends. Where is Arthur Morales? Danny asked, turning his palms up and thrusting his arms forward. Dead in France, he answered himself, turning the palms down and dropping his arms in despair. Dead for his country, dead in a foreign land. Strangers walk near his grave, and they do not know Arthur Morales lies there. He raised his palms upward again. Where is Pablo, that good man? In jail, said Pilon. Pablo stole a goose and hid it in the bush, and that goose bit Pablo, and Pablo cried out, and so was caught. Now he lies in jail for 6 months. So Pablo stole a goose and hid in the brush. Danny sighed and changed the subject, for he realized that he had prodigally used up the only acquaintance in any way fit for oratory, but the loneliness was still on him and demanded an outlet. Here we sit, he began at last. Broken-hearted, Pilon added rhythmically. No, this is not a poem, Danny said. Here we sit, homeless. We gave our lives for our country, and now we have no roof over our head. We never did have, Pilon added helpfully. Danny drank dreamily until Pilon touched his elbow and took the bottle. That reminds me, Danny said, of a story of a man who owned the 2 whorehouses. His mouth dropped open. Pilon, he cried, Pilon, my little fat duck of a baby friend. I have forgotten. I am in error. I own 2 houses. So Danny drank dreamily until Pilon touched his elbow and took the bottle. That reminds me, Danny, of a story of a man who owned 2 whorehouses. So Pilon reminded Danny about his inheritance. Whorehouses, Pilon asked hopefully. Thou art a drunken liar, he continued. No, Pilon, I tell the truth. The viejo died. I'm in error. I, the favorite grandson. Thou art the only grandson, said the realist, Pilon. Where are the houses? Where are these houses? You know the viejo's house on Tortilla Flat, Pilon? Here in Monterey? Yes, here in Tortilla Flat. Are they any good, these houses? Danny sank back, exhausted with emotion. I do not know. I forgot I owned them. Pilon sat silent and absorbed. His face grew mournful. He threw a handful of pine needles on the fire, watched the flames climb frantically among them, and die. For a long time, he looked into Danny's face with deep anxiety, and then Pilon sighed noisily, and again he sighed. Now it is over, he said sadly. Now the great times are done. Thy friends will mourn, but nothing will come of their mourning. Danny put down the bottle, and Pilon picked it up and set it in his own lap. Now what is over? Danny demanded. What do you mean? It is not the first time, Pilon went on. When one is poor, one thinks, if I had money, I would share it with my good friends. But let that money come, and charity flies away. So it is with thee, my once friend. Thou art lifted above thy friends. Thou art a man of Thou art a man of property. Thou art a man of property. Thou wilt forget thy friends who shared everything with thee, even their brandy. His words upset Danny. Not I, he cried. I will never forget thee, Pilon. So you think now, said Pilon coldly. But when you have 2 houses to sleep in, then you will see. Pilon will be a poor paisano while you eat with the mayor. Danny arose unsteadily and held himself upright against the tree. Pilon, I swear, what I have is thine. While I have a house, thou hast a house. Give me a drink. I must see this to believe it, Pilon said in a discouraged voice. It would be a world wonder if it were so. Men will come 1,000 miles to look upon it, and besides, the bottle is empty. Oh, shit. Is Pilon hustling him? Was Pilon looking for him? I don't know. What do you guys think? I sound like I'm sounding bitter, but I don't know. That's just funny though. It's a really funny fucking book, dude. It is actually pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Peace.